Hello, guys, and welcome back to this new episode. Today, we are going to talk about what extremism is, right? And specifically, we are not going to deal with the more sociological aspect of it, but more simply, so to speak, we are going to deal with the psychological foundation for extremism. There has been an interesting research that has been carried out. This research dates 2021, so it is very recent, and it discusses a few aspects, right, through tests of extremism. Let's start from the basic info about this research. It involved 330 Americans. They were administered a series of tests. 37 of those were neuropsychological. 22 of them were on personalities, so like aspects and main traits of their personality. And after 25 months, they were subjected again to another battery of tests. The results that came out, and they were absolutely amazing in a sense and mind-blowing, were two. The first aspect that emerged was that an extremist mind has a very low or cautious cognition. Now, let's understand a little what is that about. In other words, the perception arrives, right? There is no delay in the perception. The reflexes work pretty well. So this is not a problem of some sort of delay or some sort of misinterpretation of that signal. So the perceptive signal arrives, right? At this point, the response is very cautious from a cognitive standpoint, so to speak. So they were slower in reacting to certain type of stimulus, right? For instance, that could be to follow an object to the right, and they were slow doing that. And I myself had what I think right now is a very slow cognition, a very slow in a sense that it took me a while to understand that my hands were or could be used to stop the fall when I was a child, and I would tend to basically create lumps in my forehead because I would always hit my face and my forehead to the ground. Let's however not talk about me. So going back to my point. Now, if the first criteria is the slow in responsiveness, the basic low cognition of or two stimuli, the second trait is almost contradictory to the first one, because the second trait has to do with strong impulsiveness. Now, strong impulsiveness has to do with perception that gets amplified, that gets unmanageable, that is not well contained within the body, right? And that prompts them to act or react to a certain event. Now, this seems contradictory again, but in reality, it's just almost a way to overly compensate the slowness in reaction to a fundamental kind of like very basic stimuli. But there is here another very important study that we have to mention, a different one, because in this second part of our video, we are going to deal with how the radicalization process actually takes place. So this study involves teenagers or kids who have just become adults, and it is a study that involves people from 15 to 29 years old. It is located in Bihor, Romania, and there the researchers have studied attempts at radicalization. Now, in the studies, we notice how they have tested different factors that could give us a statistical indication of when a terrorist could become actually a terrorist. And what they have seen is the following. Some of those kids operate alone, they work alone, they do not have any contact with other terrorists, and they are way more prone to having mental disorders, especially linked to depression. Whereas depression does not appear to be a factor at all in those groups, in those people that operate in groups, right? When we say groups, we mean that either operate alone, but they are tied to other members, other terrorist members, or they work not alone, but somehow they're always linked up to other members of their groups. I want also to specify that naturally depression is not a factor that we consider in any point in time a factor for terrorism. That is not the case. And that we said is not the case, mostly because we cannot operate in the other direction. In other words, we cannot say that everybody that has depression is going to become a terrorist or is going to become an extremist in any shape, way, or form. Therefore, that cannot be it. It being the identifying factors as underlined by Campbell. With that being said, though, we have also here to consider another option, which is known as law frustration. Now, in order to understand the concept of law frustration, we have to take a step back and go back to what Ellis has defined as anxiety. In other words, Ellis has differentiated between anxiety coming from the ego, that he indeed renamed as ego anxiety, and what is known as discomfort anxiety. So in the first case, right, we do have anxiety because we value ourselves. We value ourselves in relationship to and in relation to a certain performance, right? So in other words, what happens is that I have to go and take a test, and this test is important. Now, it's important for my well-being. It's important because it's going to allow me to get a degree or to get this job. And so I'll have, a problem of anxiety that is related with, or to my, it's related to my ego, and it's related to my possibility of gaining something out of this situation, because I see what it is at stake. And I think I'm risking my well-being, my prosperity, and that will give me anxiety, right? Now, anxiety can be perceived in different ways. It doesn't need to be like a huge panic attack for me to say that I have anxiety, but it's gonna make me tense, my stomach is gonna close, and I will have some sort of tension there, right? Because I'm risking my prosperity. But the second type of anxiety is so interesting, because whenever I feel a threat and I perceive a threat, and a threat that is personal to me, to my life, to my existence, then the distress that I'm going to experience is going to be greater. It's going to be different in quality also, not just in amount, but most of all in quality. Because let's say if I'm being held captive, if I am an hostage of somebody that is keeping me there as some sort of prisoner, right, then I will perceive a threat that is to my own existence. I don't know what is going to happen to me. I don't know what is it that I have to undergo. I don't know if I'm gonna come alive out of that kind of situation, right? Therefore, let's say I don't have a panic attack, I don't have one incident where my anxiety bursts out, but I will have, especially if that is protracted and prolonged for a considerable amount of time, I will experience for sure anxiety. Now, this type of anxiety is different because here I perceive something as a threat to my own existence. Therefore, not just the scale of it, but the quality of it is extremely distressful. Now, I've made those two examples just to make it clear the difference between ego anxiety and discomfort anxiety. But what I want also to underscore here is the fact that I might perceive, due to a bunch of different circumstances that possibly can be traced back to childhood, I might perceive something that is more of, objectively, more of a ego anxiety as a discomfort anxiety. And so you see that there is no clear-cut difference and distinction between the two, but the two can very well merge and become one, where my ego anxiety is actually my discomfort anxiety. So now that we have discussed what is a discomfort anxiety and an ego anxiety, we have to talk about low frustration tolerance, right? Now, let's say that I have goals, right? And that I want to realize my life in a certain way. I want what I want. And I, at the moment, am not experiencing the reality exactly the way I want it. I have two sorts of reactions. One reaction is that I try to adjust it, is way more mature. I try to adjust myself and the current situation to what is my goal, to what I want from life, and I try to shape myself and my life according to that goal. Or I could have a totally opposite reaction, that is that of demandingness, right? That is, I want what I want, so it's going to be like it's going to be and like I want, and there is no other way out. It is there is no either or, there is no B plan, there's only one plan, and I'm going to stick to that plan. The problem is that when that plan doesn't get concrete, it doesn't get real, then I'm gonna have some sort of crisis, I'm assuming, considering, you know, the demandingness, the stress that I'm gonna put myself under just to realize that. Now, our research, which is everything but mine, does not show that low frustration tolerance can predict with absolute precision the radicalization of an individual. In other words, even low frustration tolerance, it is not a criterion that can be defined as good enough for predicting when and if somebody is going to get radicalized and is going to become an extremist, right? The only factor that can predict that it is what they have called the global evaluation of self. Now, in order to understand this concept, we have to take a step back and understand that there are two different phases to this, right? The first phase is when an individual, when a child starts transforming very quickly due to present circumstances, their goals into necessities. So at this point, me having a certain type of job, and me having that job, and me studying, and me getting like a 9 on a scale from 1 to 10, me getting 9 on that test is not any longer a goal, an aspiration, but it is an absolute necessity, right? Which means that ego anxiety has turned itself into discomfort anxiety. Everything that does not adhere strictly to my plan is going to be a catastrophe of sorts. The second phase is that happens when we are under a superior authority that keeps telling us, you must be doing this, and you have to do that, and it is like that, and you have to do that because I told you so, etc. Right? And in this kind of scenario, it's interesting that we are constantly measured against the hypothetical scenarios. So in other words, our worth is not established and is not evaluated on the virtue of what we actually have realized, what we actually have achieved, but it is always measured against the hypothesis of what should have happened, could have happened, and we were not able to make real, to make concrete, to make manifest. The global evaluation of self is actually the only tool for radicalization, right? Now, these studies have been conducted in certain types of situations, right, where also some terroristic groups or minor terroristic groups were being studied and their members were being studied, right? But we also need to understand that For us to be a radical, we don't even need to be terrorists, right? Radicalization can happen in all sorts of fields, right? And what determines that is the habit of indoctrinating our children into thinking that their self is worth only against that hypothetical scenarios that either themselves or somebody else has established for them. With that being said, though, I want to say that for now this is all. So I'm waiting to hear all your comments. I want to understand what you guys think, and if you think that this is actually the only tool that can allow us to understand exactly the situation. So comment below, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so that you can receive every new update. And we're gonna talk next time on a new different topic, but I found this extremely good to talk about, extremely like interesting. And so with that being said, bye bye.